Your computer finishes starting up, the desktop appears, you click the first thing you need, and nothing happens for 4 seconds. Your machine thinks that startup already succeeded, and it decided that the moment you logged in, its own documentation is blunt about it. The boot is reported successful after the first user has logged on, which is a claim about you arriving and not a claim about anything being finished. So the minute you are now going to spend waiting was not an accident, and it was not the machine struggling. It was scheduled. There is a number for how long a computer takes to start, and every system keeps one, and every one of them is measuring the same slightly dishonest thing. The tool that reports it on one family of machines carries the disclaimer right there in its own manual. These measurements simply measure the time passed up to the point where all system services have been spawned, but not necessarily until they fully finished initialization or the disk is idle. Spawned. Started, handed a process, told to go. The moment your session becomes possible is what its builders call a synchronization point, which is a scheduling word rather than a finishing word. It means the handful of things your login screen personally depends on are up, and it says nothing at all about the several dozen things underneath it that are still working. Everything before that, the firmware and the loader and the kernel, is a separate story with its own separate weight. This part, the part you are standing in, is a list of programs that have all been told to begin, and a system that has stopped keeping score of whether any of them got anywhere. The reason is written down, and it is not an apology. One system service manual says the delayed class exists to improve system performance at boot time without affecting the user experience, and then it describes exactly how careful it is being. Those services are started one at a time after a delay at the lowest thread priority the system has, and there is no specific time guarantee as to when the service will be started. Another system goes further and does not start most of that work up front at all, waiting instead until something actually asks for it, which does not remove the work. It hands the bill to whoever asks first, and on your own computer that is you. Read that as a design, not as a defect. The machine has decided that a computer which shows you nothing until everything is finished feels slower than a computer that lets you in early and keeps working behind you. And it is right about that. It just never mentions that you are now sharing. So picture what is actually back there while you're looking at your wallpaper. The services that were held back are starting one after another at their careful lowest priority. Every program you have ever installed that asks to launch with you is launching, and each of those drags in its own updater, and its own helper, and its own small thing that checks whether it is still the newest version of itself. The file search index is catching up on everything that changed while the machine was off, and every single thing that keeps itself in step with the outside world has spent 8 hours falling behind, and all of them noticed in the same second. None of this is unreasonable, and almost none of it is optional, but notice who chose most of it. The system's own share of that queue was tuned by people who measure it. Your share of it accumulated one installer at a time from a checkbox that was already ticked, and nobody has ever measured that. And every single one of those is starting for the first time since the power came on, which means that none of it is in memory. When a file gets read, a copy of it stays in memory afterwards, and that is the entire reason the second time you open something is instant, except that right now there is no second time yet. There is only a machine full of programs, every one of which has to be fetched off the drive, and the drive is the slow part. A typical solid-state drive answers a small scattered read in about 50 microseconds. Memory answers in about 80 nanoseconds. That is roughly 600 times, and I am rounding in the drive's favor. Scale it up until you can feel it. If reading from memory took 1 second, reading that same thing off the drive would take 10 minutes. If the drive is the older spinning kind, that same read costs 10 milliseconds, which is not 600 times worse than memory, it is 100,000 times worse. This is the same gap that makes a processor spend its whole life waiting, arriving all at once. One of those is nothing. You would never feel it. The problem is that 40 of them happen inside the same few seconds, and they are not politely reading one long file between them. They are each reaching for their own scattered handful of small ones. A drive takes requests into a queue and answers them, and being marked low priority does not make a program's files any cheaper to fetch. It only means the system was in no particular rush to ask for them. Something still has to go and get them. A modern drive can hold many requests in the air at once and answer them out of order, which genuinely helps. And it helps far less than you would like when the queue is 40 programs deep and no 2 of them. Then you click your browser and your click is a request for a file too, and it goes exactly where every other request goes, into the back of that same queue, behind 40 programs that were started before you touched anything. Then it goes away, and the reason it goes away is not that anything got fixed. It is that every one of those programs is now running, and everything they read is now sitting in memory. So the second time anything needs any of it, there is no drive involved at all. Same machine, same drive, same programs, a different price, because the expensive part of the price has already been paid. It is also why a computer you simply left running never does this to you. It only happens on the way up from cold. And the systems themselves know exactly how expensive that first pass is, because some of them go to the trouble of watching which files the startup reads, writing that list down, then reading those files in advance the next time you turn the machine on before anything has asked for them. You do not build a machine to guess the future unless the alternative is costing you something real. So go back to the 4 seconds. Nothing was wrong with your computer, and nothing had failed, and it was not old or full or tired, and no amount of reinstalling it would have made that click land any sooner. It had done the one thing it actually promised, which was to let you in as early as it possibly could, and letting you in early is only free if you agree to stand in the queue with everything it postponed in order to do it. The desktop was never a report that the work is finished. It is the earliest moment the machine could get away with showing you something, and the length of the minute that follows is a bill you have been quietly writing yourself, one installer at a time.
Everything you just figured out rests on something deeper, and that's the next video, so start there. Would you rather understand your computer than just use it? Then subscribe, and I'll see you next time, further down the stack.